Today I've got a problem, and I'm going to share it with you because it's a problem you guys may have had yourself from time to time. It's a tube of bad wax. Now this happens sometimes. I can't really show it to you because it looks the same as ordinary wax, but if you feel the texture, it doesn't have that stiff paste kind of a feeling that mustache wax usually does. It's slippery, it's got a little extra water in it, I think is what it is. And the problem with this wax is if I use this the way I normally use the wax, it's not going to hold because it doesn't have that stiffness. The mustache will unwind. And the first time I had this happen, I was actually in the middle of a big meeting in a big corporation I was working in, and my mustache was unwinding and people were giggling, and it wasn't a good presentation, you know. Now, I'll give you a quick little technical details. I mentioned in my previous videos that pretty much all hair care products dry pretty strongly, you know, and the reason that you can't use gel, even though gel dries as hard as mustache wax does usually, is that while it's drying, it doesn't have the stiffness to hold the hair in place while the wax dries and sets, and that's what causes it to unwind. This wax, when it's soft and slippery, and sometimes it's even a little soapy. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't have the stiffness in the wax because there's a little too much water, so it's going to it's just not going to hold the shape until the wax dries and sets. That's why when you get a bad tube of wax and it's a little slippery and soapy, it's a problem. Now what do you do if you don't have any wax? Right? You can't go out like this, but fortunately there is a way to get around this. And if some of you are woodworkers or model makers, maybe you've done model boats or model rockets or planes or something that uses glue, you might know this. You prime it. Now, another thing I said in earlier mustache videos and the troubleshooting video is that if you work the wax too much, you'll get little white spots in it because it's going to begin to set, and it's not a good thing. Well, when the wax is this slippery and this soft, that's not a problem, and you can actually work the wax right through, and because it's slippery, it's going to go easily, and you're going to get a very fine layer. Now, put a little extra wax there. Now, what's going to happen is that I'm going to work this through very, very well and create a very thin priming layer, just working in through. Now, normally, it would turn the wax a little whitish and make it hard to work with, but because this wax is so slippery and so thin in texture, that that's not so much an issue. And as I spread it out, it's going to cause the wax to begin to dry very quickly. And as the wax begins to dry, you can then, you see it's getting stiff already. I think I had that in my fingers while I was talking, so it actually started to dry out. And so you put a priming coat on, very thin, very light, just worked it through. And 15 to 20 seconds, maybe half a minute if it's really slippery, this is going to set up pretty well. And then you just take a little, very light second coat and work that through. And what's going to happen is the first coat, once you spread it thin, it actually begins to dry. Sorry, didn't mean to disappear on you, I just want to wipe my fingers off. It actually begins to dry pretty quickly. Then when you put the second coat on, the first coat absorbs a little of the moisture from the second coat, and it dries up pretty quickly. And what you're left with is a perfect mustache, even when the wax doesn't work. So there you go, you see, and now it's keeping the shape even though the wax is still wet, so when it dries, it's going to dry stiff and firm. So in a nutshell, let me go through that one more time. If the wax is too thin and too slippery and you try to put it on the stache, but it just won't hold the shape and it keeps unwinding on you, and you're going to know immediately when it's just not right because it won't be able to hold the shape. Whether you do the full curl or a little horn, doesn't matter. It won't hold the shape the way you want it to. So, because it's a thinner wax, what you do is you take a little bit and you work it very well through the stache. Maybe I'll do it a second time while I'm talking. So to recap, you work it very well through the stache. Just a very thin coat, just to cover everything. And even though the wax is slipperier than usual, and even though this wax normally won't hold itself up the way good mustache wax usually does, and this is generally a fine product, but every once in a while there's going to be a clinker. So you work a very thin coat through, and even though it won't hold its own shape, it'll prime the stache. And this is one time you do want to work it through, and it'll work through quickly. And you let it dry for half a minute, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, depending. It's going to start to dry quickly. And once it begins to get a little stiff, put a second coat on, and just a thin light coat. And because it's slipperier, you want to wipe the excess off. I'm just using a little bit of tissue paper here just to wipe the excess off, because we don't want to get too much moisture on there, because that's what kills the curl. We put that through, bring it around. I'm just going to make sure it matches the other one exactly. And it's good to go. There you go, see? Good as new, even with bad wax. So there's never reason not to look good. But when you do have the bad wax, some of the other alternatives, if you open it up and it's just too slippery to work with and you can get more, just put the tube aside for 6 months. It'll dry out a little by itself naturally and stiffen up. If it's the only tube you have, or if you bought several and they're all from the same batch, and they're all a little slippery and they're just not holding right, then use this trick. Just use a little priming coat and then a second coat, and you're good to go. Be more mustache tips coming to you very soon. Till then, this is Jeff Stache. See you later.